A family that quietly built billions while the cameras pointed at celebrities. A family that exports the very systems Hollywood runs on. And a family that controls port terminals on 6 continents, ranking among the global top 200 richest people on Earth. Yeah, these are the richest Filipino families in California. But before we get to the family at the very top of this list, there are 9 others you need to know about first. Because by the time we reach that final name, Hollywood's biggest fortunes may seem small by comparison. HER's Wilson family. The Wilson family is mostly recognized today by their young and celebrated music star, Gabriella Wilson, though their wealth runs much deeper than the entertainment industry alone. Gabriella was born and raised in the San Fernando Valley to a Filipino mother and an African-American father. And one thing about her story stands out almost immediately. She never had to move to Los Angeles to make it, because Los Angeles is exactly where she grew up, spending years inside recording studios and live showcases long before the industry knew her name. Fast forward to 2026, and she now holds multiple Grammy wins, a Best Original Song Oscar, an iconic performance at the Super Bowl, and billions of streams across Spotify and Apple Music. Now known globally by her stage name HER, her music business runs on royalties, touring revenue, brand partnerships, and Hollywood soundtrack placements. And that last lane in particular has positioned her voice at the intersection of Hollywood and global culture in a way that very few musicians ever managed to reach. And that is not even the most interesting part. What makes her stand out in a city full of celebrities is how deliberately she controls her own visibility. She rarely brands herself as a Filipino icon and never leans on her African-American roots for easy recognition. Yet her consistent presence at Filipino-American showcases across Los Angeles sends a signal that representation does not always need a megaphone to land. She pulls all of this off in a city completely obsessed with spectacle and overexposure, and her approach remains almost contrarian by design. No tabloid headlines, no aggressive lifestyle branding, just a steadily rising legacy built on skill, credibility, and the kind of long-term relevance that does not peak and collapse but compounds quietly year after year. Many inside the industry believe her biggest work is still ahead, and that there is significantly more to come from the Wilson family name. But what happens when another kid from Southern California decides to stop being understated and turn his own family into an 8-figure business? Jo Koy's Herbert family. So what does it actually take to turn immigrant family jokes into a global 8-figure business? Long before people outside Southern California knew his name, Joseph Glenn Herbert spent years working the comedy clubs of Los Angeles. Little did he know that he was on his way to building a massive family business empire. But for now, one audience at a time, Jo Koy built his setlist until the Netflix algorithm caught up with what Filipino-American comedy fans had known all along. Joseph, now known as Jo Koy, was doing something that nobody else in mainstream comedy was doing in Hollywood at the time. Unlike other comedians, he was not monetized humor. Rather, it was specificity. Jo Koy's demographics were specific and profitable. From older Filipino mothers to immigrant households, the particular texture of growing up between 2 cultures in Southern California. His jokes reflected the real struggles of where he came from, and he delivered his punchlines in ways that made even audiences from other countries laugh out loud. Soon, Netflix gave him the platform for well-funded comedy specials recorded on massive stages with global tours that sold out within days. His shows generate millions annually, opening doors to various film roles and merchandise that extended his new brand into newer revenue channels. The result of all this is Jo Koy's prospering 8-figure business, a booming hillside real estate network, and never-ending jobs within and beyond the entertainment infrastructure of Los Angeles. Despite facing multiple controversies, he never softened his edges for mass approval, and that decision turned out to be the smartest business move of his career. But what would it have looked like in a boxing ring moving hundreds of millions in a single night? Manny Pacquiao's family network. How does a boxer from one of the poorest cities in the Philippines end up owning real estate in Los Angeles and training the next generation of champions? Manny Pacquiao's relationship with Los Angeles is less about residency and more about transformation. This is the city where a fighter from General Santos in the southern Philippines arrived with ferocious raw talent and left as something much bigger. Today, His name on a fight card alone is enough to move hundreds of millions of dollars in a single night. Yet that only scratches the surface. His long-standing connection to Freddie Roach's wild-card boxing gym in Hollywood was not simply a training choice, but a strategic infrastructure decision. One that placed him inside the most media-saturated sports city in the world during the peak years of his career. It also gave him access to the kind of sponsorship ecosystem, celebrity adjacency, and global press machinery that no training camp in Manila could have provided at anywhere near the same scale. Manny's wealth operates as a network rather than a single income stream. Fight purses delivered the headline numbers, but endorsements, promotional businesses, and brand licensing layered long-term wealth on top of the athletic earnings. His real estate holdings in the greater Los Angeles region also gave the fortune an address in California's market. The training camps Manny ran in Southern California became talent pipelines, not just for his own preparation, but for the Filipino fighters he mentored and sponsored, turning LA gyms into incubators and cementing his role as a boxing patriarch rather than simply a retired champion. His earned access to Hollywood gave him something beyond sport, access to the entertainment and media infrastructure that converts athletic fame into enduring brand equity. And Pacquiao used that access with more discipline than most athletes who come near it. However, what would his story have looked like if it started not in a gym or a studio, but on Wall Street? Josie's Natori family. What happens when a Wall Street vice president walks away from Merrill Lynch to build a fashion empire based on craftsmanship from the Philippines? Before there was a fashion label or any of the runway presentations, and before the department store dominance and the global lifestyle empire, there was a Merrill Lynch vice president who understood balance sheets and global profit. That foundation is the precise reason the Natori company has not just survived fashion cycles across nearly 5 decades, but outlasted brands that launched with more money, more press, and more industry connections. Josie Natori founded the company in 1977 by applying financial discipline to creative production, building a brand that spans lingerie, ready-to-wear, home goods, fragrance, and interiors into a $100 million-plus global lifestyle empire that still feels intentional and culturally rooted rather than corporately assembled. Los Angeles played a quieter but structurally important role in that growth. Fashion Week LA, long-standing ties to the LA Garment District, and Filipino-American business forums in Southern California. These expanded distribution channels while also maintaining the production integrity of the brand. While the California market gave Natori access to manufacturing networks, trade relationships, and diaspora capital that a New York-only operation could not have reached as efficiently. What truly distinguishes her model from most fashion success stories is the vertical integration with Filipino artisans. Factories in Cebu and across the Philippines employ over 1,000 workers, preserving craftsmanship traditions while scaling luxury production, which means that Filipino culture is not a marketing angle inside the Natori brand, but actual structural infrastructure that the entire operation runs on. That approach earned Josie Natori the Order of La Candela, appointments to U.S. cultural commissions, and a place inside policy and philanthropy circles that most fashion figures never reach. She does not chase relevance, she manufactures it, slowly and deliberately, the same way she has manufactured everything else. However, the next family made it big from a very different approach. Sheila Marcelo's family. How do you build a $500 million company out of an economy that everyone depends on but nobody ever thought to organize? Ask Sheila Lirio Marcelo, the woman who identified something that the RN technology industry had been ignoring for decades. This is the caregiving economy, made possible by care providers and household managers who keep American families functioning. Before she started the business, the story was already enormous and sustainable. The problem was that it was also deeply disorganized, without any working platform. To solve this problem, she built Care.com. And in just a few years, her company scaled to 30 million families before she later sold it for approximately $500 million. But the real shocker was what happened next. Sheila converted her exit into a retirement, the next phase of a career that has not slowed down to this day. She was a Harvard Business School graduate, and with her knowledge and experience, her new role as honorary chairwoman drove Care.com through multiple expansions even after the company was bought. Today, her wealth flows through board seats, advisory roles, and Ohi.ai, an artificial intelligence platform built around household and family operations. And its function is to take care of the logic of the care company and push it further into the infrastructure of modern domestic life. Sheila Marcelo appears regularly at Balikbayan, LA, deeply embedded in Southern California's Filipino innovation circles, using the city as a bridge between Silicon Valley's capital density and the cultural and community dimensions that the Bay Area ecosystem tends to undervalue. What makes her story resonate beyond the exit number is the positioning. She built a technology company while raising 5 children, long before work-life integration became a standard talking point in boardrooms. And that duality placed her on Forbes' self-made women lists, often as the only Filipina in the room. But that is only because a more powerful woman from her homeland refuses to be seen, but has much greater wealth than the Marcelo family. Susan Ocampo's family business. So, who is the rumored most powerful Filipino-American businesswoman in California, and why has she never once been photographed? Trusted sources tell us this mysterious person is none other than Susan Ocampo. She does not give interviews. She maintains no public social media presence. There are hardly any photographs of her available anywhere online, which alone is a remarkable fact for someone operating at her level inside the American tech industry. And if you think that cannot be true, then prepare to be surprised, dear viewer, because it is a fact that Forbes confirmed rather than contradicted when they placed her 15th on their 2025 America's Richest Self-Made Women list. She had a net worth of just over $2 billion, and according to Forbes, she built this entirely through the semiconductor and tech industry in California and beyond. Susan is also the highest-ranked Filipino-American on that list, which means that among women in the United States who built their own fortunes without inheritance. Susan operates above founders whose companies hold America's biggest industries together and far above executives who have appeared on magazine covers and delivered keynote addresses to packed auditoriums. This is because her industry is the infrastructure layer beneath every consumer technology product that exists, from the chips inside smartphones, automobiles, medical devices, and defense hardware. It is an industry where barriers to entry are so impossibly high, and competitive intelligence so genuinely valuable that the people who succeed at the top of it tend to remain invisible by strategic choice rather than by accident. Susan Ocampo's fortune is self-made, Forbes verified, and rooted in the California technology economy that employs more Filipino-American engineers and entrepreneurs than any other state in the country. This makes her one of the most consequential Filipino-American business figures operating inside California today, even though almost nobody in that state has ever seen her face. The stealthiest billionaire on this list sits at number 5, but the names from this point own wealth that belongs to an entirely different league. The Tsai Family's Investments Corporation. Henry Tsai Sr. arrived in Manila from China nearly penniless as a child, opened a small shoe store in the years after World War II, and spent the following decades building SM Investments into the largest retail and mall empire in Asia. This company would become a consumer ecosystem so thoroughly integrated that it spans malls, supermarkets, department stores, BDO Unibank, which is the largest bank in the Philippines by total assets, property development, hospitality, and logistics. Add all these together, and we have a massive conglomerate completely owned by a family that profits from most purchases made in California and beyond. The 6 children who inherited control of the empire after Henry Tsai Sr. passed away in January 2019 were Henry Jr., Hans, Herbert, Harley, Elizabeth, and Teresita Psychoson. They had been trained inside the business for decades and stepped into leadership roles that have kept the conglomerate stable and growing. And with the Tsai family's combined fortune estimated at $13 billion, anyone bearing the Tsai name now holds positions across multiple Forbes rankings at the same time. The family's Los Angeles and Southern California presence operates through investment vehicles, partnerships, and the export of the retail systems and supply chain logic. So with this level of influence, why don't the siblings walk the red carpets at every major business event? Well, these events are only made possible by SM across multiple decades inside the Philippine market and many Filipino-owned businesses operating in LA's commercial corridors. They trace their financing models, supply chain relationships, or operational playbooks back to SM's infrastructure. This makes the Tsai family's influence in California structural rather than visible, felt in the architecture of commerce rather than announced on storefronts. Two of Henry Tsai's daughters, Elizabeth Tsai and Teresita Tsai Kozin, have maintained homes in California, placing the family's connection to the state in the most direct category available but not by market exposure or distribution agreements. Unlike most stars in LA, they do not need a name on Sunset Boulevard, as they directly export the systems that Hollywood runs on. Yet the insane levels of wealth only get bigger from this point. The Tan family's Jollibee Foods Corporation. Tony Tan Cactiong started by helping his parents run an ice cream parlor in Manila in the 1970s, pivoting to hot meals when the ice cream business proved insufficient. To make up for it, he built a fast food chain that accomplished something that global franchise consultants still use as a case study today. Jollibee not only survived the entry of McDonald's into the Philippine market, but beat it across all metrics, consistently and durably. Better yet, the company pulled it off not through pricing wars or marketing spend, but through a deeper and more accurate understanding of Filipino taste, Filipino values, and the emotional relationship that Filipinos have with native food than any foreign brand could develop from the outside looking in. That philosophy scaled into over 6,400 locations operating worldwide, a net worth of $2.9 billion for Tony Tan himself, and a ranking of 6th on Forbes Philippines' 50 richest list for 2025, placing him among the small group of Filipino billionaires who appear on the Forbes World Billionaires list rather than only on regional rankings. Los Angeles County is one of Jollibee's most strategically significant American markets, where the density of the Filipino population massively changed individual restaurant locations into cultural landmarks, places where identity gets reinforced across generations. Tony Tan's family's wealth extends well beyond individual restaurant revenue into global franchising structures, supply chain operations, and real estate investment vehicles. These streams of income support continued expansion, and the entire empire rests on a single insight that most global brands spend enormous resources trying to manufacture artificially. That nostalgia, when handled with integrity rather than exploitation, is a renewable resource that compounds across decades and does not require a marketing budget to sustain itself. But what does Filipino wealth look like when the product is not something people eat or feel, but something so big that the entire global economy cannot survive without it? The Razon family's terminal business. How does a Filipino family end up controlling port terminals on 6 continents? And how does it also become the only Filipino household in the entire global top 200 richest people on Earth? Ask Enrique Razon Jr., the man who controls International Container Terminal Services Incorporated, which operates port terminals across Latin America, Africa, the Middle East, Europe, and Asia. This makes his fortune genuinely global in its architecture in a way that distinguishes it from the fortunes of most Philippine billionaires whose wealth originates domestically and then diversifies internationally at the margins. Forbes placed Enrique Razon's net worth at $16.5 billion as of 2026, ranking him 175th on the Forbes World Billionaires list. This effectively made him the only Filipino anywhere inside the global top 200, a distinction that reflects not just the size of his fortune, but the structural nature of the industry it comes from. Because port terminal operations are not subject to consumer trend cycles, brand relevance, or cultural moment dependency in the way that retail, food, or entertainment fortunes are. ICTSI's revenue depends on the movement of physical goods across oceans, and as long as global trade continues, the terminal's Razon controls will continue processing it, which is why his wealth has a durability profile that most billionaire fortunes, including several above him on Philippine rich lists, do not share to the same degree. Enrique Razon Jr. also controls Bloomberry Resorts, the company that operates Solaire Resort and Casino in Manila, one of the anchor properties of the Philippines' entertainment city development along Manila Bay. This adds a hospitality and gaming aspect to a portfolio that's otherwise entirely infrastructure. Yet his wealth comes nowhere close to the final family on our list, the Villar family. How does a boy who sold seafood in the markets of Tondo end up owning more land than almost any other person in Southeast Asia? Manuel Villar Jr. was born in Tondo, Manila, one of the most densely populated and economically pressured urban neighborhoods in Asia. and he spent his early adult years selling seafood in public markets, absorbing the economics of supply, demand, and survival. He did all this at street level long before he ever stepped into a boardroom or a Senate chamber. That early formation would become the part of the Villar story that every business school case study tends to mention first. And it's mainly because it is the part that makes the $17.2 billion fortune feel like a natural outcome, rather than a success by accident. He identified in the 1970s and 1980s that the expanding Philippine middle class was generating a demand for affordable housing. But there was a huge problem. Existing developers were entirely unable to meet the required volume and price point. So Villar built Vista Land and Lifescapes to fill that gap. Over the following 4 decades, the company turned into the largest home builder in the Philippines by volume, constructing not only luxury condominiums for the already wealthy, but entire subdivisions and communities for families buying their first home. Yet his achievements didn't stop there. Along the way, he was elected to the Philippine Senate and served as Senate President, a combination of business dominance and political power that places him in a specific and very small category of Filipino elite. His family's holdings today extend across Vista Land, Vista Malls, which competes directly with SM in the mall sector, all-day marts and grocery retail, commercial leasing, infrastructure development, and a land bank that Forbes valued at $17.2 billion as of 2026, ranking Villar first on this list and third on Forbes Philippines' 2026 rankings. Their Los Angeles connection runs through U.S.-based holding entities, California real estate investments in both commercial and residential property, and participation in elite diaspora networks. And despite the many controversies, these networks are where influence travels through ownership structures rather than public-facing ventures or brand visibility. Now let's discuss in the comments. Which family on this list surprised you the most, and do you think Filipino wealth in America is being deliberately overlooked? If you like the video, then don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Her Status for more. Now click on the next video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it. Until next time, take care.